welcome back to Reclaim You. Abby and I are here and we're picking up where we left off last month on our kind of series about working with folks who identify as adult children of alcoholics. So, hey, Abby.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah.
Hey. So, Abby, if you didn't tune in last month, be sure to tune in because we were talking about identifying as an adult child of an alcoholic or addict and what trauma has to do with it all. So, Abby kind of broke it all down in our last episode. And today we're going to be diving in a little bit more specifically into some of the traits that have been identified as the laundry list for adult children of alcoholics and addicts. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the laundry list?
Yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned last time, for those who have listened, or if you haven't listened, adult children of alcoholics, addicts, that kind of phrase was born out of 12-step programs, and common 12-step programs are like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, just like centered on group meetings for folks who identify in that way to create space to, share stories, hear similar stories, gain skills and tools for navigating whatever it is you're navigating. So with that being said, the ACA 12-step program or program as a whole created what's called the laundry list. And I have it up just so I can reference it. So that's why I'm like looking from side to side if you're watching via video. But the laundry list is really just a list of 14 what they'll call traits of an adult child of an alcoholic or addict. And I don't claim to be an expert or know all about, how this list was developed. There's more information on their website. And as a disclaimer, right, like some people really identify with 12-step programs and find a lot of support and healing. And others are like, no, not for me. And that's totally fair and okay too. So I just want to add that disclaimer. But I thought it would be interesting to look at this laundry list to pull apart maybe how I conceptualize how these traits, and I'm putting traits in air quotes because I also am thinking not only traits, but behaviors or what might be more commonly thought of as symptoms came to be from a trauma perspective. Our practice is very focused on trauma, healing from trauma. We talked a lot about how growing up with caregivers struggling with substance use is a trauma. Yeah, so I thought it'd be cool for us to kind of pull apart the threads that underlie this list of 14 and talk about it more from the trauma lens.
Yeah, I love that. And the 14 traits, right? As you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, like, oh, so like the 14 strategies that people who experience this in childhood might develop over time. So when we say strategies, some people might think symptoms, like Abby said, but strategies for survival. We really believe that the way that we function in the world is for a good reason, right? It's adaptive. Eventually, it might turn on its head and not feel that great. And that's where trauma work comes in. But anyway, I don't know, that was in my mind. So I thought I'd share the strategy thing. And Abby speaks to that in a blog post that she's put together that I'll link to as well. But yeah, let's dive into the trauma lens of these 14 traits or 14 strategies, or just like a handful of them, and how we make sense of it in our work.
Yeah. So I kind of approached this list of 14 through the lens of various trauma responses, trauma strategies, as you've mentioned, that many are familiar with when you think of fight, flight, freeze, right? Many of us have heard of fight, flight, freeze as reactions to traumatic experiences, very normal reactions to traumatic experiences. And we'll dive into what each of those means. But I really went that route. Like, how can we maybe categorize this list of 14 into trauma responses? So the very familiar ones are fight, flight, freeze, and then two additional ones, and maybe there's many more than this. These are just categories that I've included here, include the fawn response or submit response, which again we'll dive into, and then the attach response. So maybe I'll start by just kind of briefly describing each of these trauma responses, and then we can dive into the how the list might fit into these. So I'll start with fight, and then Sarah, feel free to chime in with any additional
Hmm.
thoughts you have. But when you think of fight, it's pretty, maybe self-explanatory. It's when we're responding from a place of perhaps hypervigilance, right? Like maybe there's that fight energy. I'm trying to think of an animal because sometimes it's helpful to pair with an animal. Any animals coming to your mind, Sarah, to go with fight?
I was thinking, so I just saw this video on Facebook of an alligator. It was a really weird video of two guys in a pond. Alligators live in ponds, right? Like, I don't know what it was. And it was like just approaching them and they weren't moving. I don't know if it was staged. Anyway. And it went, right? So sorry for YouTube. I just put my hand on the camera. That feels like fight, right? Like it just like lunged.
Yeah. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
when threatened by these two people, like the natural response from this alligator is lunge, attack, bite, all those things.
Yeah.
And like in humans, maybe we're not doing the same. Maybe that is a response, but you might even think of like, even like an inner critic, it has fight energy. If that inner critic within us is speaking to us as like, oh, you're horrible, you're terrible, I can't believe you said that, I can't believe you did that. Like that has some fight energy to it. So
Yeah.
a little bit more nuanced than the alligator response, but it
Yes.
has that fight energy. So you can think about
Yes.
like, what kind of energy does this reaction within me have? That's very much like fight. And I'm looking at a little descriptor of this too from Janina Fisher, who talks a lot about these responses. So great resource if anyone is looking for resources. But she writes self-destructive behavior, controlling behavior, that judgmental reaction, anger, of course. So that's fight. And then moving on to flight. Flight is that escape response. So why are animals not coming to mind for me today? Like an animal that's threatened in the wild.
I've got a good one. I have a good one. My puppy, right? I still call him a puppy. He's getting to be not a puppy. But so when we're outside, and it used to happen a lot with other dogs barking, but now it's just sudden noises. There's a noise and he bolts. He bolts for the house. So he flees. He is like, bam, gone.
Oh, that's so funny that's his strategy. He's ready to get on out of there.
He is. He's like, get me in the house. Get me in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that perfect flight example, like just escape, flee, get out of the situation. And that's a great like animal example. And then in us humans, flight could look similarly, like we're just like bolting, getting out of a stressful situation. More often than not, it may be more internal. So like maybe there's isolation or distancing. Even I'm just looking at this list here, like addictive behavior as a way to flee or escape emotion or stressful experiences, thoughts, even like if we're numbing through substance use or really anything to numb could be considered
eating.
Like,
yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, a way to not feel or not be in whatever is present. Flight energy.
Yeah.
Anything you'd add to the flight?
No, I think that's great.
Yeah. And then freeze. I always think of a bunny, like a rabbit that's like frozen, but clearly is like shaking. So there's energy there. There's a response happening within, but they're frozen and can't move, or like a deer in headlights.
Yes.
And I don't know, at least for me in humans and my own freeze response, like that feels to be very true. Like I don't know which step to take or which direction to move in or what to say, but like my heart's pounding internally.
Yes.
So that feels like a freeze example.
I'm a freezer. That feels right. I freeze. So I'm working on it, but I freeze. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the brain it's moving, but nothing is happening. Like, why can't I, speak up or you're just kind of frozen. Fawn or submit is also a nuanced one, but I'll read what Janina Fisher writes here. So she writes that like a submit or fawn response might look like depression, shame, passivity, being like the good kid, people pleasing. She doesn't write that here, but like people pleasing, being a caretaker, sacrificing yourself for someone else, like real like submission. Just if I am good, if I am doing everything right, if I'm quiet, I will be safer. I think sometimes with like fawning. Sometimes like the animal that is used as an example is like a possum. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Or like playing dead, but I don't know if that would be submission. I don't know if that would
Uh,
be something
I think
else
that would be some
entirely.
submission. Yeah. Because
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's like collapsing, but it's still like engaged, right? Because it
yeah,
uncollapses at some point.
right. This one gets a little bit.
Yeah. It's like it's blend. It's a solid blend, I
Yeah.
think.
This one in particular, I my brain goes immediately to people pleasing. Like if
Yeah.
I'm just good and perfect and no one's mad at me or no one's even like I'm impacting no one,
Yeah.
safer that way. So
It's
submit,
so much safer
fawn.
that way.
But then like shame, depression, yeah, I guess that passivity of just like it's just a less active response. And
Yeah. Like there's not as much energy to mobilize. Yeah, that like submit, that collapse, right?
yeah,
Where it feels safer to collapse and not maybe like test the boundaries or test the
yeah,
waters or something like that, challenge some like inner rule of sorts, something like that.
yeah. And then the last one that we'll talk more about the attach response. And so what's written here is desperate, craves rescue and connection, innocent, wants a protector. I also think of like a child's natural cry for help. And maybe when that's showing up more in like an adult state, in a safe state, that cry for help can look so many different ways. So maybe there's not so much an animal to go with this one, but yeah,
And
I
I'm
think of
trying to
the
think
cry
about
for help.
Toby. I'm like, how does Toby attach other than just follow me around all day? I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but can be a response to trauma. Like if I'm not getting my needs met, I'm
Hmm.
gonna cry a lot louder. Perhaps maybe that's someone's response. So all to say, these different responses we can float in and out of them. In my experience, we do have tendencies towards some more than others, but they're all, like we said at the start, strategies for finding like finding safety. They're all strategies for survival. They were strategies for survival when the trauma was happening. Maybe if it's still happening, like they're strategies for survival. And then through the lens of like trauma for adult children of addicts, alcoholics, these strategies, especially the ones that have worked really well in the past, are the ones that stick around in the present. And they stick around in the present in ways where we may be reacting with these same responses to various triggers in our present day environment, even though we're not in that place with those people, maybe. So yeah, we'll get into it with examples from the laundry list. That feels like a good
Yeah,
transition.
totally. Yeah. Should we go back up to starting at fight and kind of share some of the
Yeah,
traits or strategies from the list, the laundry list?
yeah. So again, I think also in like the ACA program, they'll say not you may not resonate with any of these, you may resonate with some. Maybe all of them. All of it's okay. Everyone's experiences are so unique.
Yeah.
And even if you don't resonate with any of these on the list, it might still be interesting to explore what are my strategies in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, attach, and how might those have been useful in the past? How are they showing up in the present? Maybe in ways that are still useful, but maybe in ways that I want to kind of explore further. Like, are these things that are
Yeah.
serving me still in the fight category? And again, not a perfect science. And Sarah, you might even like, it's helpful to have another set of eyes too, to be like, but this might also fall into X
Uh-huh.
category. And there is overlap, and I've written some
Hmm.
overlap in there too, but we'll start with fight. So again, fight energy, the alligator, the
The
two
alligator.
on the laundry list that stood out to me the most in the fight category. The first being we become addicted to excitement, which I've also put in flight.
Hmm.
So when the idea of like we become addicted to excitement, I don't know, what comes to mind for me is like that could look so many different ways. Addicted to chaos, addicted to
Drama.
drama. Yeah, like maybe there's something really enticing about impulsivity. Yeah, there's something like fight and flight about that
Hmm.
for me,
Hmm.
like with excitement, addicted to some kind of excitement. I love reality TV. I think a lot of people
Totally.
do. Maybe that's
Oh
not
yeah.
limited to just ACAs, but there's an escape in
There sure
the
is.
drama of reality TV, and And maybe there's an escape for some people in the chaos that they are drawn to in their day-to-day life. So I know I'm going more in flight, but with the fight energy, the excitement gets our heart racing. It gets that sort of felt, like that felt sense of maybe what we're familiar with or used to, which is that hypervigilance, that fight energy. And one could argue because that's a familiar state of being, we're drawn to that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, curious to hear your thoughts if anything's
Yeah.
coming up around that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you're right that like when we're brought up with similar like dynamics or environments where there is maybe a lot of chaos or excitement or drama or kind of like hypervigilance, that pattern does just become embedded, right? Where our nervous systems go there. And so we unconsciously, right, to just say that, we unconsciously recreate these things often in our environments, in our worlds. I mean, I'm even thinking of like gossip. Like gossip can be a fight strategy. It can also be a flight strategy because you're trying not to worry about your own shit. So you're worrying about other people's shit. Right. And then at the same time, you're fighting yourself or you're fighting other people. So it's like, yeah, it's this activation and this mobilization of some kind of energy. And yeah, like you said, it could just be replicating a pattern that you're super used to from a long time ago.
Yeah. And I love how you highlighted that piece, the unconscious part, kind of just like we fall into it for really good reason. So
Totally.
Yeah. The only other one I put in fight is we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. It makes sense, right? If you grew up with a caregiver or caregivers who struggled with addiction, feeling a sense of responsibility maybe for them or for others in the family, and that kind of carrying through. And there's some fight energy there of like, I got to be on, I got to take care of Vic, and that can be carried through into the present. So that's fight. Sure. In flight, I have 3, and we already touched on these. So we become isolated. Maybe isolation is a way to, flee from all the emotions, right, that are associated with growing up in a chaotic environment. Isolation can look a lot of ways. So I'll leave it there. But addicted to excitement, we've talked about. And then this item on the list, we have stuffed our feelings from our traumatic childhoods and have lost the ability to feel or express our feelings because it hurts so much. That stuffing of feelings, just like you had described with gossip, like maybe we're engaging in certain behaviors unconsciously, maybe consciously, who knows, but as a way to avoid feeling. So that's flight. And just to keep, moving through these, freeze, I just have one, but there might be more. Who knows? We are frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. This is just me then continuing on to say, I imagine people who are frightened by angry people, personal criticism, they might fall into a freeze response, because if you grew up with angry people, personal criticism, and that was really terrifying and overwhelming as a kid, a freeze response makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm just going to stay still, because if I do anything more, what will then happen?
Yeah.
So that kind of unconsciously maybe showing up in the present. And maybe it's not even actual personal criticism, but the fear of perceived personal criticism, or like the possibility of someone becoming angry. It may not even be that someone's angry, but the freeze response is happening. This could also be flight. Like, I'm going to avoid emailing someone.
They can all like escalate into, right?
Yeah, so that's freeze. But anything else that you would add to like fight, flight, freeze before we?
No, I love what you're sharing. And maybe it's this like accumulation of energy from the fight and the flight that puts you into freeze, that like there's so much energy in your system doesn't know what else to do, so it just like bloops, it goes offline. So I think that kind of all that you've shared could probably culminate into freeze at some point, because our nervous systems can only take so much.
Yeah, such a good point, that like all of these, if you like consider them as parts of us, like they all have relationships with one another, and they bounce off of each other, or they like you said, like, is it a people pleasing response that's then triggering this freeze response? It's kind of what's that?
It's if you're seeing us on YouTube, you're just watching our hands move back and forth. What is that, a pendulum?
Oh, pendulum, or like
we're going like
pinball
this.
machine.
Yes, a pinball machine. Yes,
that's a better pinball. Yeah, they all intersect in lots of ways, and we all have our own unique patterns. So that's what's cool about. I don't know if I want to say cool. It's hard to say.
It's like, cool that our bodies just do this unconsciously. I think that's kind of the neuroscience geeky coolest part. that like
Yeah.
we're designed to do this to keep us safe, right? That's the cool part. I mean, there is suffering, which is not cool, but the fact that our bodies and our nervous systems can do this just like organically,
Yeah.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the cool part.
Yeah.
And it can be interesting, maybe not cool, but interesting to start to get to know our own nervous system patterns, which is something that we talk a lot about. And because when we do get to know them and start to understand our own pinball machine, if you will, like we can maybe become more aware of when it's happening in the moment. Because like you said, so much of this does happen on an unconscious level. So yeah, just to like, wanting to make sure we get through the last two, but with the fawn response, I just have 3 in here, and some of them maybe, yeah, they are overlapping. One of the items on the laundry list is we become approval seekers and lose our identity in the process. I resonate with that one a lot. I think we've talked a lot
Me too.
about approval seeking, people pleasing, frightened by angry people and personal criticism we've talked about. And then the last one I have on here, we feel guilt when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. And that just screamed submit fawn response. So it's like, we're not going to stand up for ourselves. We're going to just whatever you say.
Stay safe.
And then lastly, the attach. There's one on the list of 14 that really stood out to me as being an attach response. I have my own thoughts and feelings about how this is worded. So maybe like, if you do too, you can kind of word it in your own way. Maybe I'll summarize. Kind of talks about how like maybe we become dependent and terrified of abandonment. We'll do anything to hold on to a relationship in order to not experience painful abandonment feelings, which maybe we received from living with people who could not be there for us emotionally. Makes so much sense that we would develop, perhaps like some of us might develop that attached response.
Absolutely.
Doing anything possible to avoid maybe real or perceived abandonment.
Yeah. And just the fact that we're biologically wired for that too, right? Like it makes even more sense that we have to attach to survive, right? So then when the attachment isn't secure, maybe we push to attach with more energy in some ways, hoping to get what we don't have.
Yeah. We are relational beings. That is our nature. Like we're wired to connect. And if that connection is disrupted for really any reason, but especially like because we're talking about adult children of alcoholics, addicts, like that connection may have been disrupted in some way because of those caregivers' ability to be there emotionally. Many ways can show up. Makes a lot of sense. All of this makes a lot of sense. So
it all makes so much sense.
Yeah. With that being said, if anyone listening resonates with any, some, all, none of these, like it could just be really interesting to get to know your own patterns. And that could be done. I created this blog, and there's like a little bit of a journaling exercise within if you wanted to dive deeper. And of course, like we're always here to respond to any questions, like requests, all that good stuff. So
I was going to say that the blog that Abby wrote is wonderful. And there's also a graphic that I think is going to be really helpful in like organizing some of these traits or strategies from the laundry list into the different survival responses. So maybe, take a look at it and just see kind of what comes, like where you resonate. And the journaling prompts that Abby included in the blog are also just another wonderful way to sink in a little bit and get a little bit more curious about what's happening for you and just making sense of your experience. Because I think speaking to all of this, we've said it probably 700 times already today, but like it makes sense that you're functioning in this way after what you've gone through.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And the in my mind, at least, like one of the first steps is just starting to notice and get curious about what might have been the strategies that we've developed for really good reason. And I like lists like these in some ways, even if because there was plenty on this list that I was like, no, not me. But in being able to say, no, not me, I was able to say, oh, that's me though. Like
that's me.
Not even on the list, but this is me. Sometimes we need a concrete example to be able to tune into what is really true for us. So that's
totally
another reason why I like this list. It can be a launching pad for more exploration.
And if anyone's, looking for specific, trauma therapy, trauma support, Abby is fabulous. And, I can also link to our specialty page on our website to check out. And just, if you have questions, let us know and we can get you hooked up with some support.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. And thanks for the blog and having these conversations and sharing more about this. It just feels so important. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. We will be back next week for another episode. And until then, take good care.